Welcome back after your break, and I hope your brains have had a bit of a break so you are ready for the next section of work that we are going to be covering. Before the break, we looked at the different types of permanent tissue, which are tissues that stay, once they've been formed, they stay the same and they carry out a very important function in keeping the plant alive. As we investigate these tissues, think about eating fruit, such as an apple or a mango, because as you eat those, you're going to be eating all these different types of tissues. First type of tissue we're looking at is something that we peel off most plants. For example, when you're cooking potatoes, you peel potatoes. When you're cooking carrots, you peel carrots. And that is because the outer layer of any plant part is usually much tougher than the inner layers, because its function is to protect the cells inside. And this is the first tissue we're looking at, which is epidermal tissue, forming a skin around the different parts of the plant. If we look under a microscope, that is what the cells would look like. Fairly small cells, but the important part is they have got a lining. Most of them have a lining called a cuticle, which protects them. You know, when you take an apple and you rub an apple, it looks so shiny. That is because by rubbing the apple, you have smoothed the waxy cuticle so that you can see that it's actually nice and shiny. The cells underneath that often have a thickened wall, because if their job is protection, they need to have an extra thick wall to be able to do their job. We find them on the outside of all plant parts to protect and keep in water. But you couldn't live with a plastic bag over your head. In the same way, a plant can't live if it's totally isolated from its environment. So in certain parts of the plant, you will find special cells which take in the substances a plant needs. We're going to have a look at two of these. First one is something called a guard cell, which is found in leaves. They're actually really quite cute little cells, because this is what they look like. Two cells next to each other with a little hole in the middle. And that hole is so that they can take in the gas needed for photosynthesis. And the cutest thing about these is they can open or close, just like somebody's kissing you, just like lips that are busy kissing you. These are found in the outer layer of the leaves and the stems, because that is where substances need to be taken in. Apart from gas, what else do plants need to take in? If you have a pot plant, what do? You water the pot plant. Where do you put the water? You put it in the soil, because in the soil are the roots, and the roots are specialized to take in water. And they can do this because they have specialized root hair cells. This is the surface view of a leaf with some of these stomata, and you can see the opening between the two guard cells where the gas can go into and out of the leaf. Also notice that these epidermal cells are very, very closely packed and there are no air spaces between them because the only way air can get into the plant is through the stomata. And this is such a cute picture because it shows what the stomata actually look like, and it clearly shows the pore in the center. It also shows the fact that around the pore is a very thick wall surrounding the pore, whereas the walls on the outside of the two guard cells are much, much thinner. But air isn't the only thing that plants have to take in. For example, if you have a pot plant, you have to put water on the pot plant to keep it alive. And where do you put the water? You put the water on the soil. And that is because in the soil are the roots, and the roots have specialized cells whose function it is to absorb water. And these are the next specialized epidermal cells we're looking at. They are called root hairs. And this is a picture of a seed that is starting to germinate, and you can see all the thousands of little outgrowths it has, and those are all single-celled tiny root hairs. And here is an enlarged picture of a root hair. I'm outlining it in red. It's a cell of the epidermis, and it has this outgrowth. And the outgrowth is where water can be absorbed. And the root hair increases the surface area so that there is more space for the plant to take in water. And this is obviously found in roots. Just underneath the epidermis are lots of different types of cells, and we call these ground tissue. And they have different thicknesses of walls, they're different sizes, and they have different contents depending on what their specific function is. And we are going to have a look at the 3 different types of ground tissue. This is a photograph taken under a microscope, and we can see different types of cells. We can see big cells with thin walls. We can see other cells with thick walls, and these are simply the different types of ground tissue. These big fat ones are called parenchyma cells, and these ones with the very thick walls, obviously for protection and support, those are called Sclerenchyma, and there is another type we will look at later which has walls that are not quite as thick as Sclerenchyma. And these are all found in different parts of the plant to carry out different functions. First ones we're looking at are parenchyma. Now, you have no idea how many parenchyma cells you eat when you eat your supper. Because when you eat a potato, potato is made of parenchyma cells. When you eat an apple, the apple is made of parenchyma cells. When you eat a carrot, when you eat a mango, any plant part you eat is made up mainly of parenchyma cells. And they are just ordinary cells. They're probably closest to the drawing that you did when you learnt about the cells. So, what are these parenchyma cells like? They're large and they have thin walls. Okay, as you can see there, there's the cell, there's its wall. And wow, look, it's got lots of green things in it. Those green things would be chloroplasts. Then they are generally loosely packed because there is usually some space between them. Now, if we look at this one, what do you think the function of this particular cell is? It's got lots and lots of green things, so obviously its function would be photosynthesis. But not all parenchyma cells look exactly like that. Here are 3 different types of parenchyma cells. They're found in different parts of a plant, and depending on what their function is, they would have different contents. For example, here we have cells filled with chloroplasts. That's obviously in the leaves for photosynthesis. What we have here, that is your potato. Because inside those cells, those little purpley things, those are the starch grains, and you should know that when you eat potatoes, you're eating a lot of starch. This picture shows very nicely how there are spaces between the cells. Then, the other type of cell, if we have a look here, these are storage cells. Can you see the spaces between them? That's important for gaseous exchange. But this cell looks empty, and that is because it's got a huge vacuole, large vacuoles filled with sugar. So that would be in your apple. Here you would see those purple things filled with starch. They are your leucoplasts. And these would all be found in different parts of the plant. Okay. Parenchyma cells have thin walls. They're great for storage, but they're really, really bad for support. So where a plant needs support, it would need to have cells with walls that are thickened. And there are 2 types of that. And the first one we're having a look at is something called Collenchyma, where the cell walls are thickened in the corners. If we have a look there, we can see the corners, and that is where the cell walls are extra thick. They also don't have any air spaces. And because they've got thick walls, their function is for support. So they would obviously be found wherever support is needed. They're often found just underneath the epidermis, and this is a picture. There are the Collenchyma cells with their thickened corners, and there we have the epidermal cells. Then, if those walls aren't thick enough, if the cell or if the plant really needs something firm to support it, we can have cells where the entire cell wall is extra thick, and this is called Sclerenchyma cells, and they have very thick walls, and also they have no cell contents. Because their walls are very thick, they do a wonderful job of support and protection. For example, grass stems, nutshells, pear flesh, and mango pips. And let me tell you, Sclerenchyma, you wouldn't like to eat it because it really is tough. Some Sclerenchyma cells are elongated with their thick walls. Others are short fat cells. And this example is found in pear flesh. And if you ever eat a pear, you sometimes find those hard, gritty bits, and those are special Sclerenchyma cells called stone cells. Why they're in a pear, I don't know. But the ones that are found in grass stems are actually very good for support. If we look at this picture, let's see if we can identify. Here we have cells with thin walls. What type of ground tissue would they be? Which is the type of ground tissue with thin walls? Parenchyma. If we look at these cells, the walls are thickened, but only in the corners, so that would be Collenchyma. And if we look here, the walls are thickened all the way around, so that would be Sclerenchyma.